Hello, ZUKO here, and I've been DMing for a year. I've learned many things in my time, and I think some DMs just don't know what they're doing and need some tips. So here's some things I learned that I think would really help a lot of people for getting into their shoes. So let's get into it. Now, the most important rule I have for new DMs is that you should take your own fun as a priority. And you need everyone to understand that if you're not enjoying anything about the game, you are free to change it. Of course, this comes with the caveat that you have to talk to your players about it as well, because they are part of the game too, and if they are having fun with something, then maybe you need to talk about it and say, hey, I'm not really enjoying this thing for these reasons, or maybe you don't know, maybe you're just have a bad feeling about it. It is important, and it is okay and valid to talk to your players about something you're not enjoying. Even if it's something that can't really be worked out or tweaked mechanically or anything, if it's something personal and not anything about the game itself, there are ways to go around it and to weed out those little things that are irking you. And this goes for the same for players as well. These are DM specific tips, but some of these things players do apply to. And I would say as well that DMs are players, so I don't think anybody can't not take this advice, especially this first one. It's important to keep in mind that your home games, for the majority of you, are not as consistent and not as high quality and are not going to need as stringent of caveats and little things to uphold as a show like D20 or CR or NatPod or World Beyond Number or anything like that. These are games you are playing with you and your friends. You don't have to be the most consistent. You don't have to be going at a breakneck pace the whole time. You also don't need to be doing the things those shows are doing, because that is a lot of extra stress and time management and prep and so many things that are just to a standard that pretty much almost none of them can achieve. Not even themselves at times. I mean, there are least favorite seasons of any of these shows for a reason, right? Because they themselves cannot hold up to the standards and the expectations of even the fans have put on them. So I would say that you should give forgiveness to yourself on a lot of things. Say a joke was poorly timed and needs to be a second for apology, or you ask the players what they want to do, and it takes a good couple minutes for them to think. I'm not saying this has to be a thing where you just have to be okay with people thinking for a long time, but it's okay to take longer time periods to have something play out. It's okay if something doesn't go the way you want it to go. You can always retcon something in the moment or later. You can always redo the scene if you really want to. There are ways around a lot of things. Now, is it always advised to do something like that and just totally redo a scene just because you don't think it went the way you wanted it to? No. But in certain instances, those are okay things to go about. Especially if the players and yourself are in agreement about something not going the way that you think it would have happened. Now, there are certain restrictions you can put on yourself, like if the dice have already been rolled, it already happened, and there's nothing really you can do to take away from that. But if it's like, oh, you said something wrong, or a description has been mapped out, and you're actually not going to do those things because you've realized the caveats of those decisions, or what those might be in the future, then yeah, I think that's a reasonable thing to take away from the encounter. The real message of this point is to just not hold yourself back and your game back and your fun back because you have to hold up this value of being consistent or in a certain way or be a certain way or say something a certain way. You are here to have fun. It is a game for a reason. And yes, this game is powerful and profound and all of these things, but it's a game first, and you should treat it as such. Which brings me to my next point. Something I've done as a DM myself, and I'm sure many new DMs have fallen into the same pitfall just because no one really told them that this was going to be an issue or something that you were going to have to just learn to do. So I'm telling you now so that you know, because I wish I knew. And also, I think not a lot of DMs on YouTube say something like this. Please, 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 for the integrity of your game and for the fun of you and your players, I beg of you, please, whenever you're making an encounter, whether it be social or combat or social combat or whatever you want to do, please consider, really consider why it's happening, as in not just the events that led up to it, what is the point of it being there, and also, if the players fail, are the consequences of failing going to feel good and fit what the encounter is? For example, the pitfall I fell into was that I had set up my party in this urban fantasy style game to go to a concert because an NPC begged to go there. And it did make sense for that NPC to go there, and they did have a nice time, and they met some people. But I was planted at this concert backstage that one of these people was a person from this person's backstory, and it weaved them more into the plot because, to be honest, it was my first time DMing. It had only been a few months, and that's only so many sessions under my belt. And this person wasn't necessarily the best player either. They didn't ever make a character that was anything more than, I just want to burn everything down, and that wasn't going to fit anyway. So I naively tried to make it work anyway. So they saw on the face of this person at the concert was somebody who had basically killed their parents. And they predictably stormed into the bus and started ransacking and gathered some great amounts of information. However, this is where the pitfall comes in, besides the fact that this person was trying to walk back into the bus to go grab something while they were in there, and one of the players were distracting them, trying to stall. There were also 2 assassins in and around the bus that were protecting it because they were going to go to a meeting or something. I don't quite remember exactly what the details were. But they got found out, and then they got ran off the premises, and someone called the cops. And that should have been the end of the encounter. They should have just been like, oh, this is bigger than we thought. Let's regroup. Let's continue doing our work, and let's keep tabs on them later. Could have been a fine outcome of this encounter. I, however, wanted a certain outcome to happen, completely out of the character's control. I basically sent more assassins after them because they knew too much, and they're essentially evolved in mafia shit. They were ran out of the country, and they went into these old lands that were to the south, which were basically an undeveloped, forested wilderness area. With maybe some people scattered here and there, but not really anything like the modern-esque fantasy high-level magics of the rest of the world. So, I then, through a multitude of other things, continued to make the same mistake and wanted to tell my story. A pitfall that if you have ever read a D&D horror story, know where this is going. Wanted to do a little bit of a narrative and wanted the players to experience that, but either went about it in a bad way, or was too controlling, or didn't know what they were doing, and ended up being bad. But the caveat being here was that I thought I was being fair. I was like, oh, that's just a logical thing that would happen after the players did that. But no, it wasn't, and I was fully responsible for that happening. And it wasn't the players' faults at all. They could have done absolutely nothing. And I think I would have found a way eventually to have that happen to them, even though I don't think they could have stopped it. Which is a problem, and I knew this, and then the game fell apart and I became better and tried again, and now I'm running a new game and I don't make those mistakes anymore. I'm a changed man. I'm a changed person. I'm a changed DM, and I don't do things like that anymore. But As a new person who doesn't really understand how to do certain things in D&D, and the only people you have to go off of is CR and D20 and these huge stories that have a point to them, you don't really fully get what goes into them and how things are really meticulously plotted out and planned. But they're not planned in the way that I did them. They're planned in a way of like, here are some moments we want. Here's the guiding stick that just nudges them in the direction. And it feels good. And although there are battle sets here and there might get to these things eventually, and the encounters are scaled differently for different levels, but eventually all of this will come together. It is bad and strange to do it the way I did it. So please be careful of falling into that pitfall. Consider in many situations where the consequences should meet what's actually happening. It should be fair, and don't take agency away from your players. So that's tip number 2. But also, counterpoint number 3, if you have an idea, just try it. There's really no other way to say it. A lot of the times I feel like that I've gone on to D&D YouTube and tried to find if somebody has ran a certain encounter before, and I don't know necessarily how to do it. I look for other examples. Maybe it's been done in a D20 show, Dimension 20 CR, or some other like Adventure Zone or whatever the hell. Maybe it's been done before, or maybe somebody has rules for it, or maybe, you know, there's so many things over the years and years of Dungeons & Dragons, 5th edition especially, but other things of D&D as well, and other TTRPGs that just have these things in place. But quite often I don't really have much that I found in terms of resources. Now maybe I'm a bad researcher. If you can't find things to do, you should just try to do it the best you can, and it's okay if it doesn't work out perfectly. As long as you follow caveat number 2 that I just explained, you should be in a pretty good state to work out how this works. As long as it seems fine and seems fair and seems like it would make sense, why not do it? I mean, if you're never going to know how to do it unless you do it anyway, so you might as well make up a couple rules, maybe make it simpler for you, and then see how it goes. And if it feels weird, you can do stuff on the fly, change it, or you could afterward tweak it, and the next time you do something like that, you'll have the knowledge of what happened already, and you'll know where things were stronger and where things were weaker, and it's pretty easy to tell during the game where those things are. And also ask your players for feedback, how they liked it, and if they're just saying, yeah, it's good, and they're not really actually saying anything constructive, and if you want that constructive feedback, ask them specific questions, like, hey, this part where I made this ruling, or this part where this mechanic came into play, did that feel good? Was there anything I could have improved about it? Something like that. And even if your players aren't the most mechanically sound and knowledgeable and have a good feel for mechanics like some other players do, maybe they can say a feeling that they think they would have made, and then maybe you, being the DM and more mechanically minded, could work that feeling out into mechanics and make that feel a little bit better. Don't limit yourself just because somebody else hasn't done it already. Like, do your research, of course, but if you find that there isn't, then don't be afraid, because that's kind of what the point of the game is. Just trying out new things. And I think you'll find that you'll probably do a fine job anyway. And even if it's not perfect, you'll pretty much know what the problems are, and you can make that better in the future. And that's kind of why I like D&D so much, because it is a very creative game that you just kind of have to think about and kind of have to make numbers from ideas and ideas from numbers. And it's great. I think that's why a lot of people like D&D too. You know, this is more of an honorable mention, but I think it's worth saying. And I'm not saying you have to do this, but for me, it helps. And I make music. Link below in the description, by the way, and in the About tab of my YouTube channel. But I absolutely adore music and, you know, sound and the effects of being immersed into a world that, especially during games where you're not in person, where you're able to pull up pretty much anything on the fly. But also if you're in a home game, you can just play things on your phone, or if you have speakers or something that you connect through Bluetooth just from your phone, or you have who knows, you have a special TV that has like a Roku or something that can play YouTube or Spotify or something, or like you can AirPlay to. I think it's very, very, very immersive and helps the game's vibes and feel an immersion to add music and maybe sound effects as well. If you're on Discord, I highly recommend the bot Kenku FM. I don't think it's technically a bot, but I think it is an extension you can add to Discord. Look it up, it's very, very good. It doesn't have the caveat of Discord bots having like the restriction of countries and things and not playing on Spotify directly through Discord, and it doesn't have the caveat that you can't do much of YouTube through Discord because the bots have to be verified, and you know they can't go through Google and YouTube because of whatever the hell was happening. But Kenku just streams directly from the internet. It just takes the exact sound and just streams it into the Discord call. So it's very, very useful, and you can control it at the click of a button, and you can on the fly type in a link, grab it, and then just move in. And then there's also, for sound effects and things, there's also something called, I believe, Fantasy Grounds? Let me double check. No, Fantasy Grounds is a TTRPG. So sorry. Fantasy Plus is what it's called. It's, I think it is partially paid, but it's got some great stuff for there. I have a lot of playlists, and I use suspenseful ambience. I have like a general ambience, and I have battle music. And I have really just and I also have a playlist that I keep for music I'm gonna use later, or like boss music that I think is just more intense. But I have lots of these little playlists that I use during games literally almost all the time. They lead to some of my favorite moments, and really just sometimes when the music hits just right and you weren't expecting, it's just on shuffle, and then the music is just a paid actor and drives a point home as far as possible, and you just feel the tension in the room. It's great. It's great. And you know, my battle music is really from a lot of video games, and it's very upbeat, like Undertale music and, you know, like Final Fantasy music. You're dancing while you're cleaving the heads in of monsters, and if that's not fun, I don't know what is. And I'll also be linking all of the playlists I have and use in the description below. They are public, you can look them up at any time. I think that's all I have for you guys today. Hopefully this list has been helpful to you and has maybe shown some light or given you ideas or inspiration, or helped you just corroborate a bunch of tips that you just didn't know. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you're feeling up to it as well, besides the playlists and everything else, please go check out my music. I make hip hop, I think it's very good, and I'm bad at marketing. So hopefully these videos help me get a few listens. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoy and have a wonderful day. It's been Lord ZUKO, signing out.